Texas license plate, no rear tire, and dark tint, was parked right up next to Brandon Boudreaux's driveway, idle. At 9:13 a.m. on October 2nd of 2019, Brandon Boudreaux returned home. That Jeep had been idling there already for over an hour. When Brandon turned onto his street, he immediately noticed this Jeep because it was parked so close to his driveway. The back of the Jeep was facing towards him, and he immediately also noticed that there was no rear tire. He saw a Texas plate on the Jeep, and then he saw that back window of the Jeep open up, a rifle barrel come out and point at him, and then bang! He heard a shot and his window shattered right next to him. Brandon hit the accelerator and he took off. He turned the corner and drove a block or so away and stopped, calling 911. He talked to the operator and told them where this Jeep was going. As Brandon was speaking with the 911 operator, he had no idea that that bullet had struck his car just a few inches from his head. You'll learn that in the back of that Jeep was this defendant's brother, Alex Cox. He had been lying in wait with a rifle for Brandon to return home. This defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, the woman seated over here, had loaned her Jeep to her brother so he could drive it to Arizona, so he could be in the back of that Jeep with very dark tint that no one could see through and wait for Brandon to return home. The goal of this defendant and her co-conspirators? To shoot and kill Brandon Boudreaux. So let's talk about October 2nd and the weeks leading up to that. All of the actions that this defendant did in furtherance of that conspiracy and the premeditated murder of Brandon Boudreaux. I'm going to start with a little background for you. In June of 2019, Brandon Boudreaux was still married to his then wife, Melanie. You're going to learn that Melanie is this defendant's niece. You're going to learn they were very close. And you're going to learn that they both had it out for Brandon. On June 25th, Brandon and Melanie got into an argument. And Brandon learned that this defendant had told his wife that he was gay, that he had hacked into her computer, and that Brandon was trying to work with her then husband to take her temple recommend away. You're going to learn that many of the people, including Brandon and this defendant, are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And having your temple recommend taken away is a very significant event. You're going to learn and see that Brandon actually texted Lori Vallow on the 25th of June to confront her about these lies, and that she never responded. By July, just a short while later, Brandon and Melanie were seeing a mediator and proceeding through a divorce. You're going to also hear that during this time, Lori Vallow and Alex Cox lived here in Arizona. In fact, Lori lived in Chandler. You're going to hear about an incident that occurred on July 11th of 2019 in Chandler involving Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. The Chandler police were out at this defendant's residence, and they took photographs of some vehicles. One of those vehicles was a 2018 Jeep Wrangler with Texas license plates, LWD 0997. That will be very important to you. They also noted that Alex had his own car, a Ford F-150. Both of those vehicles were in Chandler in July. You're going to learn that in August through September, Lori Vallow and her brother Alex Cox moved up to Rexburg, Idaho, to be closer to this defendant's soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell. Both of them moved into a complex at 565 Pioneer Road in Rexburg, Idaho. Lori took the Jeep Wrangler and a Nissan Rogue, and Alex brought his Ford F-150. So everyone had their own vehicles. You're going to learn that as the divorce is proceeding between Brandon and his then-wife, Melanie, that they put their house up for sale. And Melanie moved out and got a rental property. When their house finally sold, Brandon had to rent a home too. And on September 13th of 2019, he rented a house at 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert. Brandon will tell you that his plan initially was to stay in his own house almost up to the time of the closing and then move into the rental property. You will see a text message that Melanie asked Brandon for his new address. They had children in common, so he didn't think anything of this. And he sent her the address. That was on September 17th. You'll learn that Melanie Boudreau, this defendant's niece, was the only person who knew Brandon's address, who knew 3875 East Phelps Street, and who also knew this defendant and Alex Cox. Brandon barely moved into that house before the shooting. In fact, he'd moved in sooner than he thought because Melanie told him she was going out of town and offered him the kids for an extra weekend. And so he moved in sooner and took the kids while she flew to Rexburg, Idaho on September 26th through the 29th to be with this defendant. So in the weeks leading up to this October 2nd shooting, we'll talk about all of these things that were done in furtherance of this conspiracy, starting with Lori Vallow's Jeep. You'll learn that Alex Cox searched out a place to have extra window tinting put on the Jeep. And I say that because you're going to see the photos from the Jeep in July, and you'll see there's tinting on the windows, but you can still see into it. And so, on September 25th, Alex Cox took that Jeep to Dan's Window Tinting in Rexburg, Idaho, and he paid $200 to put some of the darkest tint you could put on it. You'll see those photos of what that Jeep looked like afterwards. This is the first action of this defendant, Lori Vallow, in the conspiracy, loaning her brother this Jeep and allowing him to put on these dark tint to get it ready so he can lie in wait and no one could see him in the back with that rifle. It is her first mistake, using that Jeep and tying herself to the conspiracy and to the premeditation. Also on September 25th, you're going to learn that Lori Vallow and her accomplice, Alex Cox, went to the Walmart Superstore in Idaho Falls. You're going to learn that's not far from Rexburg. And they purchased a burner phone. Now, a burner phone is a phone that you don't have to put your subscriber information to. And so, how do we know that Alex Cox was there and Lori Vallow was there? Well, you're going to learn they each had their own cell phone, like most of us do, and that Alex Cox's cell phone was utilizing Wi-Fi inside that Walmart at the time that burner phone was purchased with cash. And you'll learn that this defendant's cell phone that was subscribed to her was utilizing cell towers in the area of that Walmart at the time that that burner phone was purchased. Lori Vallow and Alex Cox knew that he would need a phone when he drove down here, but they knew you don't want to bring your own phone. It's a great, you'll be tracked, right? So they bought this burner phone so that Alex would have contact while he drove down here and away. But Alex made a mistake. Because like any other phone, you can still use a burner phone to access Google or your Gmail accounts. And you're going to learn that Alex accessed his Gmail account. In this investigation, you'll learn the police executed many, many search warrants, and one of them was on Alex Cox's Gmail account, homerjmaximus@gmail.com. You're going to learn that Alex searched for things like window tinting in Rexburg, that he searched for places to practice shooting ranges. You're going to learn that he searched different things about angles or trajectories of shots. You're going to learn that the day before, on October 1st and the morning of October 2nd, he searched 3875 East Phelps Street, where Brandon Boudreaux lived. You're going to learn that after the shooting, Alex Cox actually searched for directions on how to get away through a back road. He knew he hadn't killed Brandon. Brandon's calling 911, and so he searched for Pine Top, Holbrook, Moab, Utah, Fillmore, Utah, and eventually Idaho Falls as he made his way back through back roads. You're going to learn that the police also executed search warrants on this defendant's Gmail account, lollytimeforever@gmail.com. On September 30th, the day when her brother took her Jeep and started driving down to Arizona, she searched, quote, how to get the back seat out of my Jeep Wrangler. And she also searched a YouTube video, Jeep Wrangler JK rear seat removal, how to DIY YouTube video. This defendant continued to be a co-conspirator and to aid her accomplice, Alex Cox, by searching how to remove that back seat of the Jeep so he could better lie in wait to shoot Brandon. This was the defendant's second mistake, and more evidence of her being a co-conspirator and the premeditation. This defendant also, on September 30th, began aiding Alex by becoming his alibi. You'll hear from Nick Valance, who is an FBI agent who deals with cellular analysis, that around 4:30 p.m. on September 30th, Alex Cox's cell phone, the one that he subscribed to, moved from his apartment in this same complex where he and Lori Vallow lived to Lori Vallow's unit. And from them on for the next couple days, Alex Cox's phone remained with this defendant. Meanwhile, that burner phone from that Idaho Falls Walmart on September 30th started moving towards Arizona. You will hear that on October 2nd of 2019, at about 8 in the morning Arizona time, about an hour before the shooting, this defendant created the alibi. She had Alex Cox's phone call her phone to make it look like he was still in Rexburg, Idaho, instead of in Gilbert, Arizona. That fake call lasted about 24 minutes. Both of those cell phones were using the same cell tower in Rexburg, Idaho. This was Lori Vallow's third mistake. More evidence that she was a co-conspirator and of that premeditation to aid her brother in this shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. So how do we know, though, that Lori Vallow's Jeep drove from Idaho to Arizona? Well, we're going to start by learning about what we call LPRs, or license plate readers. You will learn and see a photo of Lori Vallow's Jeep in Arizona on October 1st of 2019 up near Holbrook on the I-40. You'll hear that the DEA has a license plate reader there, and they took a photo of Lori Vallow's Jeep with that license plate LWD-0997 on its way to Gilbert, Arizona. You're also going to learn that the police later recovered that Jeep back up in Rexburg, and they did a couple different search warrants on it. And what they recovered inside the Jeep, among other things, was a receipt from October 1st of 2019 from Mesa, Arizona, the day before the shooting, from a restaurant called Los Favoritos out on Power Road. You're going to learn that at the time the burner phone is down here in Arizona. You'll learn that Alex Cox was using his Gmail and Googling an address on Power Road around the time when we then see the receipt. Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's Jeep, and Alex's rifle are here in Arizona waiting to commit this shooting. Meanwhile, up in Rexburg, on October 1st, this defendant does a little more additional help. She goes to a storage unit in Rexburg, Idaho, and rents unit C52. The next day, on October 2nd, when the shooting is happening down in Arizona, or after the shooting actually, she brings her soon-to-be husband, Chad Daybell, with her. And you will see video of this as she and Chad Daybell put the rear tire and the rear bench seat of that Jeep into the storage unit. Using the storage unit for that Jeep tire and that bench seat so that her co-conspirator, Alex, could lie in wait in the back of the Jeep, waiting for Brandon to return home that morning. This is, again, evidence of that conspiracy and of the premeditation to kill Brandon. So October 2nd, the morning of this shooting, you will see that Alex Cox was Googling that address, 3875 East Phelps Road. His burner phone from Idaho Falls, Idaho, is in Gilbert, Arizona. He's using his Gmail account, and he is using cell towers around Melanie Boudreaux's residence. Now, this is important because Melanie knew that Brandon had their kids. They had 4. She knew that Brandon that morning was going to have to drop off 3 of the kids at school and that they would exchange their youngest. They would meet at a park. Brandon would text Melanie, let her know he was there. She would respond, and they would exchange their youngest child. While Brandon was leaving his house to take his kids to school, that Idaho burner phone moves to his residence and begins waiting for him. Alex kept the Jeep running as he waited for Brandon to return. What Melanie didn't know was that Brandon was going to the gym after dropping off the kids, and so Alex had to wait longer. You'll hear that one of Brandon's neighbors noticed this Jeep. It's a neighborhood that doesn't have any real easy ingress or egress. You'll see a map of it, so there's very little through traffic. And so the neighborhood knows and recognizes most of the same cars. And you'll hear from a neighbor that as he was backing out, he saw this Jeep parked the wrong way on the road, nose to nose with another vehicle that he did recognize. He saw the dark tinting. He saw it was running, and he thought it just stood out as unusual in his neighborhood. It made him actually look into his rearview mirror to note it had a Texas license plate. This was about 30 plus minutes before Brandon arrived home. When Brandon got to the house that day, Alex was ready with the rifle. And we know that he was able to just lift up that back window because the tire wasn't on it. Alex fired 1 shot. Luckily, he did not hit Brandon. You will see that Brandon was driving a Tesla at the time. And unlike many cars, there's no frame around the window. The window just goes into the door, into the car itself. The shot hit the frame of the vehicle, but right where the window goes up into it. And you'll see that there is damage to the window as well as the bullet hole into the frame of the vehicle itself, right above Brandon's head when he was sitting in that driver's seat. You'll hear that when Brandon took off, the window remained in the door, that he drove away and then eventually circled back around and went into his driveway. You'll hear that for a Tesla, when you put the car in park, the door automatically opens and the whole window just shattered out. Brandon was on the phone with 911 soon after the shooting. You'll hear that call, him actually sounding out of breath from the fear. And he waited for the police to arrive. Alex Cox, of course, is Googling how to get out of there and get back to Rexburg, Idaho. And by October 3rd, he was back there. That same day on October 3rd, you will see that Alex Cox and Lori Vallow went back to the storage unit. They removed that rear tire. They removed the rear seat of the Jeep and took it with them. You will again see video of that. You'll also see that they Googled that day, news in Gilbert, shootings of Brandon, to try to find out what the police knew. How did the police figure out that this defendant and Alex Cox were involved? Well, when the police were interviewing Brandon, they asked him if he had any enemies. Who would want to do this? And Brandon told the police the only people he could think of was Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. He told them that Lori had lived in Texas and that the Jeep had a Texas license plate. And he told them about that incident on July 11th of 2019 in Chandler involving Lori Vallow and Alex Cox. And he believed this was all tied together. You'll hear that the Gilbert police reached out to the Chandler Police Department and learned about that Jeep with the Texas plates, LWD 0997, the same plate that was seen on that license plate reader on October 1st coming into Arizona. The Gilbert police learned that Lori Vallow and Alex Cox were living in Rexburg, Idaho, and they reached out to law enforcement there. You'll hear that on November 1st, police in Idaho went to 565 Pioneer Road, that apartment complex, and they saw Lori Vallow, they saw Alex Cox, and they saw Chad Daybell. They didn't see the Jeep that day, and so they went back a few days later on November 4th and saw the Jeep located near Lori Vallow's residence. Tires back on it, rear seat is back in it. You'll hear that they impounded it, and on November 18th, the Gilbert police flew to Idaho to process it. You're going to learn about GSR, or gunshot residue. You're going to learn that they processed the vehicle. Basically, they're little sticky kits. GSR is microscopic. You can't see it, so you try to collect it, and then you give it to an expert to look through it. You will hear that those kits were sent to the Phoenix Police Department and reviewed, and that particles indicative of gunshot residue were located on the kits that were tested from the rear of that Jeep Wrangler, and that this is consistent with a gun being fired from the rear of the Jeep. You also hear that the Gilbert Police Department collected DNA from areas like the steering wheel, the gear shift, seatbelt buckles, and that they got a blood blot from Alexander Cox. DNA profiles were created from the steering wheel and other areas around the driver's seat. And the DNA was found to be a mixture, multiple people, but the major contributor was Alexander Cox. Again, you will hear that the police executed multiple search warrants on cell phones, cell tower usage, data from Gmail accounts, and data from iCloud accounts. You will see a map of Lori Vallow's cell phone, Alex Cox's cell phone, as well as that burner phone from that Walmart in Idaho Falls, the one that was associated to Alex Cox's Gmail account. You will hear from Nick Valance from the FBI, and he'll show you how that burner phone went from Rexburg, Idaho, down to Gilbert, Arizona, was there for the shooting, and returned back to Rexburg, and was never used again after that. You will learn that the only phone number that that burner phone called or received calls from was Chad Daybell, this defendant's soon-to-be husband. The same phone, of course, that was using those cell towers right around Brandon's home at the time of the shooting. This defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, has been charged with conspiracy to commit the first-degree murder of Brandon Boudreaux on October 2nd of 2019. The evidence in this case will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant conspired with Alex Cox and others to kill Brandon. She provided the means, the Jeep, she helped get the Jeep ready, and she tried to provide an alibi for her co-conspirator. At the end of this trial, the state will ask you all to hold this defendant accountable and find her guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.